Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith. We're talking about the election results. And gentlemen, I have this question for you, and that is that we have not spoken about who will now or what happens now with the state attorney general's office since Shapiro will be moving into the governor's mansion. Governor, I'll start with you.
Well, when he becomes governor, he has the ability to then nominate somebody to fill out his term who would be confirmed by the Senate. So, for instance, when I became governor, I nominated Linda Kelly, who had actually been my first assistant when I was United States Attorney, and she assumed the role of Attorney General until Kathleen Kane was elected and then took her place in the following year.
Will there be then a special election?
No, no, no. She serves out the rest of the entire term. So if he gets, that'd be 2 years from now, during the presidential year, there would be an election for a new attorney general. Both parties would put somebody up. When I did it, and when Linda Kelly did it, we made the promise that we wouldn't run in order to get confirmed by the Senate. I assume, especially since the Republicans control the Senate, that's still going to be required of anybody that Josh would nominate to take his place.
That will likely be the deal. That always is. I see Joe nodding his head. That's usually the deal when we're in control of the Senate. The deal is you can have the seat, but that person can't stand for a full term. So I don't think that will change this year. Do you, Joe?
No, not at all.
I agree. Okay. It'll be the same thing Governor Corbett did back in 2010, and then there will be a race in 2 years when the term expires and there's an election.
All right, let's talk again about the autopsy because it's going to start on the Republican side, and it might be a little gruesome. The Republican primary, the gubernatorial primary, on this program, a couple of you said that the state leadership let the party down in that it did not come in and try to help choose a candidate for that office. Do you still think the state party leadership for the GOP failed the party?
Stacy, the Republican Party in Pennsylvania acted like Democrats during this election. And the Democrats acted like the Republicans always acted. You know, we were more discreet in choosing our candidates. They had a free-for-all. And, you know, that's typical of the Democratic Party. But this time it wasn't us, it was them. And they paid a price for that, I believe.
I've got to echo what Jim or what Joe said in this. The fact that when at one point we had 13, 14 people running to be the gubernatorial candidate always astounded me. In my days of running, the party leadership, it was much harder to do that. You had to work with the state committee, work with the regions of the state committee. In this case, you had our candidate that won, Mastriano, had a small hardcore, but he wasn't a good candidate. He did not know how to campaign in the way you campaign in Pennsylvania. He didn't use everything that was available to him, but he had a small core. The other ones kept taking away from each other, and they could never overcome his, I think he finished with 43, 44% of the primary vote, clearly knocking everybody else off, who truly had much more experience of trying to run statewide in a campaign.
You have two autopsies. I'm sorry, Keith. You have two autopsies. You have the state autopsy that we need to look at on what happened. I think Joe and the governor have given a good dissertation on what and why that autopsy needs to be done and what they're going to find. But you also have to step back and, as part of the PA Republican autopsy, tie it in with the national GOP autopsy that needs to take place. I mean, you know, Keith, you've talked about so many issues over the last 6 months that were spot on. People were worried about the economy. People were worried about inflation. People were worried about crime. These things are polling. I mean, we admit that. You have a president whose numbers are down. We admit that. I mean, these things, and combine that with a midterm. This should have been an overwhelming red celebration last night. And it didn't happen. I mean, people with all these struggles and concerns and anxieties and worries that they have. Then you bring in the Roe v. Wade issue. That generated the Democrats and got them thinking again. Now you watch Mr. Trump and the candidates he put up. So with all this angst and worry going on in the United States of America, they looked at Joe Biden, they looked at the Democrats, looked at the message, and they looked over here, which they traditionally do in an off year. And despite all this that's going on, They chucked the GOP and they stuck with the Democrats. This is the most historic night for an incumbent president since Ronald Reagan in 1982. So they have to look, the GOP, do we continue down this Trump path, or do we step back and do we start looking at governors like DeSantis, like Abbott, and others that can right this ship? And they have about this much time, because Joe Biden's going to come in, and now I would submit he's going to have coattails.
Well, a lot of interesting commentary here. I actually agree a great deal with my buddy Joe, who said the Democrats do this a lot, but the Republicans usually have their act together. Well, the Democrats, quite frankly, can afford to do it. They are the majority party. They could split up and still win. We don't have that luxury. And unfortunately, our current chairman got the role of chairman from a person who left in controversy, who he had lost to by 1 vote. So the party was already divided. And he's never been able to really gain control since then. And we fractured. Listen, I was around as a staff member in the room over a generation ago when our former chairman, Ann Anstein, the great Ann Anstein, would sit in a room and say, you're running, you're not running, you're not getting money this time, you're going to run for judge, you're going to run for governor. And that's the way it was. Those deals were cut, and there was not controversy, and we had discipline as a party. And we understood if we didn't stay together, we would sink together. That didn't happen this time. We had multiple candidates. We ended up getting an ultra conservative who couldn't raise money. And I just now remember what I wanted to say earlier. The real issue in the governor's race is when it went north of double digits, it went to 12. It then did have coattails. What I'm realizing when I look at the tea leaves, as I always say, the tea leaves show he became a drag to everybody. He became a drag to us. He became a drag to the state house, the state senate. You can lose by 4 or 5, 6 points, make it competitive. You lose by 12 or 14, it's an issue.
Well, there's a trend here, a national trend, and I find really gratifying, really satisfying, and that is that almost all the election deniers, all the high-profile election deniers, lost across the land in this election. There were a couple that made it through, but most of them were vanquished, and that's good for our democracy. That's good for the republic.
All right.
Yeah, and even if you defeated 1 million of them, the one that we didn't defeat yet is Trump. We all the other election deniers were cast aside, and we all think his aspirations now are going to be diminished. But on my 4 calls from different experts around the Commonwealth today and around the country, they're all saying, Keith, you're dreaming. He's not going to get out of the way.
Keith, I say bring him.
Yeah, I know you do.
Of course you
I
do.
know you do.
I hope he runs.
If I were in your position, I'd say the same thing.
Yeah.
I want to continue this part of our discussion in just a moment, but we have to take a break.